Good evening. Welcome to the September 3rd meeting of the Athens-Clarke County Planning Commission. We are pleased that you have chosen to be with us this evening. In response to the state of emergency in Georgia regarding COVID-19 coronavirus, this meeting is being held via a WebEx online meeting platform, which is being broadcast on YouTube and on the Athens-Clarke County TV cable channel 180. Members of the public were provided the opportunity to email comments to the planning department prior to 12 o'clock noon yesterday. Members of the public may also address the Planning Commission in real time via electronic communication provided in the auditorium at 120 West Doherty Street, subject to safe distancing measures. For those of you viewing the meeting remotely, you will find the meeting agenda on the Planning Department website at www.accgov.com/planning. For those of you viewing the meeting from the auditorium, on the table inside of the auditorium door, you will find copies of tonight's agenda and political campaign contribution disclosure forms for those wishing to speak to an agenda item before the mayor and commission. After staff presentation of an agenda item, we will receive public comment, first from the applicant and then from those in the auditorium. 10 minutes are allowed to address the commission for the applicant or their representative, and also for any special or specified interest group representative who has requested additional time prior to the meeting. 3 minutes are allowed for anyone else who wishes to address the commission. After public comment, the applicant or their representative may request a 2-minute response. Once the public hearing is closed, the Planning Commission will proceed to discuss and act on the item. We will receive no additional public comments unless requested by commission members. When addressing the commission from the auditorium, please speak from the designated place as directed by a staff member. For all speakers, please provide your name, your address, and your occupation for the record. For those in the auditorium, a timer device will display an amber light 30 seconds before the expiration of the allotted time, and a red light upon expiration of the allotted time. So please pay attention to the light so I don't have to interrupt your comments. For those addressing the commission remotely, you will be expected to adhere to the specified time limits. Exhibits may be displayed by the applicants remotely or in the auditorium. Written correspondence received has been forwarded to the commission and is a part of the public record. Any additional written materials to be placed into the record must be read during public comment within the time limits previously stated. Please direct your comments to the Planning Commission and not to the applicants. And for those of you who are in the auditorium, please refrain from applauding or from jeering any of the speakers. For everyone participating in this evening's meeting, please do not silence your cell phones. For commission members, please mute your microphone if you're not speaking. Use the chat box if you have technical issues. Raise your hand to your camera if you'd like to speak, and please wait to be recognized. And remember that this meeting is being recorded. Before we move into the agenda, there are a couple of people that I want to recognize and welcome. We want to welcome Catherine Goodrum, known to most of us as Katie Goodrum. We welcome her as our new appointed commissioner. Katie, welcome. We are delighted to have you with us. And then this evening, Mr. Judd Drake will be serving as our attorney. All right, then we are going to move promptly into the agenda. Do I have a motion to introduce staff reports and other documents that have been submitted for this meeting into the record?
So moved.
Who was that? Ms. Kinman. Do I hear a second?
I'll second it.
Thank you, Mr. Scarborough. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Thank you. And then we move on to the approval of the minutes. You received the minutes in your packet. Are there any corrections or additions, deletions from the minutes as you received them that you have not already reported? If not, okay, Mr. Anderson.
Second.
Great, thank you. If you would raise your hand, please, if you approve of the minutes. Thank you. It's hard for me to look around, so keep your hands up just a little bit longer, but I think that was unanimous. All right, and then we will move on. Mr. Griffin, do we have any May courts information that we need to hear?
We have no report this evening.
All right, then I think we are ready to get into our applications. Our first application is under old business. The application is a master plan development, case number PD-20-02-686 at 145 Deacle Drive. The purpose of this request is to amend an existing CN or PD commercial neighborhood plan development on 7.46 acres at 145 Deacle Drive. Would our Mr. Kalk, are you making this presentation? Who's making the presentation? Is it Rick?
Rick's going to make all of them this evening. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you. Rick, you're muted.
I forgot to unmute. Okay.
Yeah, it's okay. We all do it.
Okay. I will share now. Okay. This is 145 Deacle Drive. It is part of an older plan development. This is an amendment to that plan development. This is the subject property taken from an aerial photograph. You can see the existing agricultural structures there on the property, the rest of the property being undeveloped. And just a location map again. So we have Deacle Drive coming off of Barnett Shoals Road, as well as Edgewater Drive bordering the property. Property is zoned CNPD, Commercial Neighborhood Plan Development, and that would remain. The future land use designation is traditional neighborhood, and that also would remain unchanged. So we have an amendment to an older plan development. It is compatible, again, with the future land use designation, one parcel, 7.5 acres. And this request is to revise the uses and the density of the site, residential density, has a binding application report, site plan, and architectural elevations. There are 6 requested waivers by the applicant. The first is to have a gravel driveway and parking lot in lieu of paving, and that they're trying to keep a rural aesthetic on this property and not have a paved parking lot. Waiver of minimum outdoor pedestrian lighting. The ordinance requires a certain amount of lighting. They wish to keep it more ambient nature. Again, sort of subdued type lighting on this property. To allow agricultural use. And it really is reestablishing the agricultural use on the property that was there before. Short-term stay rental cabins, which our ordinance considers as a motel, technically. So that also would be a request to go into the CN zone. Retail allowance, they've asked for a waiver to increase that allowance in the CN zone from 10,000 square feet to 13,000. Staff actually counts, because there may be an additional cabin used, we actually count 15,000 square feet. That's for a decreased buffer. In the back, along the back of that barn, the last barn on the property, there's a driveway, and you'll see in a second, it's proposed to be reduced The buffer is required to be 10 feet. They asked to reduce it to 5 feet because the fire marshal has asked for a 20-foot clearance for emergency vehicle access. This is the current plan development. You will see the subject property has been zoned currently for condominium apartments, townhomes, single-family lots. And this is the proposed site plan. You'll see the wedding event area, as well as the rental cabins, and then the some agricultural structures, and some hoop houses for plant nurseries. This is a little bit better, a little more clear version in color rendering there. You see access off of Deacle Drive, as well as off the edge of connected to Edgewater. So these are some architectural elevations of the cottages, which could also be used sometimes as an office or retail, some other use, storage or something like that. So the different buildings on the property have a variety of uses. So staff is recommending approval. There's significant decrease, obviously, in residential density from what's currently approved, and including lot coverage. It's pretty intense development that's currently approved. Also introduced commercial uses on the subject property for the first time. The rest of the plan development will have commercial uses, but this part of the plan development was not proposed for commercial. Overall, we consider it a low impact development, and we do agree that the requested paving and lighting waivers would be more in line and keeping with the intended rural aesthetic. So staff is recommending approval with a few conditions. We do ask that the private drive be gated after events so as not to allow departing traffic to use Indiana Avenue, which goes up into Johnson Drive, that area up there, the older neighborhood that borders it. So therefore, they will divert the traffic. They've already agreed to do this, just not with the gate, but they have agreed to divert traffic back to Deacle Drive. The site plan shall be revised to correct. There's a little square footage, I think just a typo on the site plan. And then the rental cabins shall not be occupied prior to completion of the events facility. The rental cabins in our mind are there for the events facility. It includes a honeymoon cabin and so forth. So for phasing, we'd rather have the cabins not go in until the events facility is actually in place as well. So that concludes the staff comments.
Thank you very much, Rick. And so is our applicant ready for a presentation? Is that Mr. Coons?
Yes, ma'am, Madam Chair. Can you hear me okay?
I can hear you. We still have, give us a minute to get the, well, maybe we're going to leave it up there. That's fine. Go ahead, Mr. Coons.
Okay, no problem. I'm experiencing a little technical difficulty on my end too, Brad. You may see me twice on there. I got my phone on standby just in case.
I've got you.
All right. Thank you, guys. Well, good evening, Madam Chair and Commissioners. Again, my name is Josh Coons. I live at 205 Clover Street. Our firm has been assisting with this effort. It's been a few months since we've seen you. And as you recall, we previously reviewed this amendment as a preliminary sort of PD step, ultimately to get your comments. What we heard was that this was an interesting idea, potentially with a lot of promise. However, there were some initial concerns regarding traffic and design waivers that we definitely needed to address. To that end, we actually voluntarily delayed returning to you to work through many of those concerns that the planning department had in an effort to get a recommendation for approval. I'm happy to say that we're here in front of you tonight with that recommendation, albeit with a few conditions. Just a brief history to recap. This is land that has been in the Deacle family for many years. The parcel in question, as Rick noted, used to be a horse farm and ag use really for over 50 years. In 2004, this area was incorporated into the Lakewood mixed-use PD and partially developed prior to the 2008 recession. Since then, a lot of this land has actually been transferred out of the Deco family, but they are still residents of this property. The area that is part of this amendment is still owned by the Decals. And after a lot of consideration and careful research revolving around successful urban farms, sustainable farms in particular in other communities, the Decals feel like this sustainable urban farm would benefit the Lakewood community specifically and the Athens community generally, and would really even complement the housing and commercial spaces that are still provided within the original PD outside of this area. Previously we talked about some of the examples. There's Love is Love Farm in Decatur and the Wrecking Barn Farm in Snellville, which are urban farms, very similar to this, that are primarily food production farms, but also serve as destination event venues. Many of you are probably very familiar with the Williams Farm here in Athens that we helped the Land Trust with a few years back. This also functions in a very similar manner and has been successful since we were able to get that open. Some of the items that we worked to address included a phasing timeline for development, traffic management, and tree canopy. We have provided a detailed breakdown of the phasing in the report, and we'll be happy to review that with you in depth. In summary, phase one is really trying to establish the farm, and the farm is primarily a crop-based operation. Farm animals will be introduced, but secondary elements that will assist with sort of the sustainable objectives of the operation. Very little change is anticipated with phase one. As a result, we really, there's little to no impact, in our opinion, on the adjacent neighborhoods, given how this property has been existing for a number of years. Phase one, again, will operate very similarly to the Williams Farm. So we think it's a good project precedent to reference. Phase two will include the development of the event venue and related infrastructure. This would include the construction of the private drive, which would be gated to control traffic as needed to limit any impacts on traffic leaving the facility. This is a planning condition that they've recommended that we willingly accept. Rick, do you mind? Are you able to pull up our slides?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, there you go. That'll work. If you want to, you can move forward one. Thank you.
Okay.
Another major element that we discussed at our last meeting was the tree canopy request, the waiver request specifically. I believe Commissioner Scarborough, you said that was a non-starter, and we took that very seriously. We've looked at this very closely, and as you recall, we were very concerned about shading some of the crop areas. Next slide, please, Rick. We developed an extensive shade study and determined that there are, in fact, many places, as you noted, that we could plant trees that would not only keep the fields open to sunlight, but would also help us achieve the canopy requirements and expand upon the vegetative buffers between this development and the adjacent neighborhood. So we really have gotten to a point where we've eliminated those tree waiver requests as a result. There are still a number of waivers, as Rick mentioned in his presentation. Some, like the request for agriculture use in the CN zone, is straightforward. Others are related to the aesthetic of the farm-based development that we would like to keep. Generally, as a community, we're still trying to figure out what to call the short-term stay rentals, despite the fact that they're prevalent within our community and very successful. So we've had to ask for that motel use. But specifically, though, we've asked for an increase in the 10,000 square foot limit on a single use. This is primarily to allow the flexibility of using the existing barns and proposed outdoor pavilions collectively as an event venue. The planning report recommends limiting this to 10,000 square feet to mitigate adverse impacts. However, I think that is an assumption that the larger the space, the more people. And in this sense, the increase in square footage doesn't necessarily equate to more people. The pavilions and smaller barn complement the main barn and are intended to support spaces, are intended as support spaces to the event. It simply offers more flexibility for an event venue to incorporate office space, storage space, pre-function space, things like that. Next slide, Rick, please. Thank you. Again, this amendment does represent a significant change in not only land use, but development. The existing PD, as Rick described, contains not only single-family lots, townhome lots, but also condominium units. From a development standpoint, this proposed PD amendment will substantially decrease the development impacts related to traffic and stormwater and some of the other concerns that we generally have. Noise has been a concern, and I think it's safe to say that the farm will be less noisy on a daily basis, despite the eventual event use when you compare the 124 residential units that could be there to the proposed farm. Next slide, please, Rick. Ultimately, the farm represents a significant decrease in traffic and a substantial decrease in general development impacts, like we just noted. The farm and event use, though, has generated some understandable concerns, such as noise and odor. Relative to odor, the density of animals being proposed, which is the same guidelines that were approved and adopted for the Williams farm previously here in town, equates in this situation to approximately 1 animal per 800 square feet. I mean, this is not a dense livestock feedlot type operation by any means. This will be a managed operation that incorporates composting and other practices aimed at recycling waste into a resource, which also sort of breaks down odor along the way. So next slide, please, Rick. From a noise standpoint, the farm, again, on a daily basis, even if the fields are being plowed, they're going to be less noisy compared to the approved density. What we've looked at, though, is the potential impact relative to the occasional event use and the noise ordinance, which the farm will observe. What's shown in this plan is a 300-foot radius, which is a distance noted in the noise ordinance relative to nuisance sound levels. It's interesting to see where that line is and just how many residences are within that distance. We looked at 2 scenarios, one outside in red and one inside, which is shown in gray. The noise carries, admittedly, beyond 300 feet, but it's also oriented. While the barn structures will be insulated and decreases sound that travels beyond the building walls, the outdoor area ultimately is oriented towards the Barnett Shoals corridor where the future Lakewood Commercial District is planned, which includes approximately 170,000 square feet of commercial space. So, we're not necessarily impacting the neighborhoods with the direction of the noise. The orientation of the sound in this area also is actually directed towards land the Dekels presently own and reside. And it's important to know that the Dekels live on this property. I mean, they have a personal investment in making sure this project works for the neighborhood as a whole. Before we go to the next slide, Rick, I want to point out we have requested 6 short-term rentals in phase 1. And those are the cottages that are on Dekel Drive at the bottom of your screen there. Next slide, Rick, please. These are images from the Julep Farms, which is one of the newest sort of agritourism developments in Georgia, which is just up 441, actually. It just opened, and it's very popular, and it's part of this growing trend in the short-term stay industry to provide sort of farm-based stays. We've requested the cottages in phase 1 to complement the farm initially, and then ultimately serve the event venue. Having these rentals will be sort of a key economic element for the farm's initial success. We would appreciate your review of the particular condition that planning has recommended for these cottages. We don't foresee any impacts on having a few of these cottages in phase 1, given the existing infrastructure in place on Dekel Drive.
1 minute, Josh.
Thank you, Brad. Next slide, Rick. Just in closing, I think we always appreciate your input, and we're happy to get your comments. We're really excited about the potential of this project. I think this could be a valuable asset for the Athens community. We certainly understand the neighbors' concerns and will continue to kind of work towards that. I think there's a relationship here that'll be established between the Dekels and the neighborhood that they both have to cultivate over time. And I think you'll hear from Shane in a second. He certainly understands that. So we look forward to your comments. I'm happy to answer any questions you may have as you deliberate this and make a recommendation. Thank you.
Maxine.
Muted. Maxine.
See, as I said, it happens to all of us, whoever it was. Rick, who didn't have his mic on, that's me. I said that concludes the information from our applicant. We will move into hearing speakers who might who want to speak to the commission for this application.
Good evening. My name is Shane Deagle. I live at 200 Lakewood Drive in the Lakewood neighborhood, along with my parents who live across the street from the proposed project, along with my sister and her family that live right down the street from the proposed project in the neighborhood. I want to say first and foremost, my family, probably more than anybody, wants to see South Vine Homes, the formerly SR Home company, and Marcia Crossings. We want them to be extremely successful. They're building homes and developing what used to be my backyard, and I want it to be a thriving community. I mean, that was our intent to begin with, and for it to be a thriving community, they have to be successful. So I'm pulling for them as much as anyone is. We've met with the residents. We had a Zoom meeting back in May. Gave anyone and everyone that wanted the opportunity to meet. I gave up my phone number, my email address. I met with people face to face. I talked for 30 minutes on the one opposing resident in the neighborhood for over 30 minutes. And did not feel that she was opposed to it at the time. But we had some great dialogue. They had questions, they had concerns, and after the meeting, I felt overwhelming positivity towards what we were trying to do versus what we can do. I did attempt to reach out to speak with one of the developers, and I don't have their information, their contact info, but I did have their attorney's information via a letter that was sent out to the neighborhood, and the response was they were opposed to our project and respectfully requested that we withdraw it, and they were not interested in seeing any changes to the property. As I mentioned, the letter went out on behalf of the development company, basically letting the residents of the neighborhood know that they would be opposing our project. And I'm encouraged, as of yesterday, no one in the neighborhood had opposed the development that I was aware of. And that's pretty, like I said, it's pretty encouraging to me, considering the fact that the development company was voicing their opposition. I also want to mention, I guess, that many of the residents in the neighborhood actually supported it and expressed their willingness to come forth and let you guys know. I didn't receive any opposition, so I didn't feel it was necessary to ask them to take time to reach out to you guys. To address some of the 7 bullet points were on the 3 emails that were sent to the commission. There is commercial space in the neighborhood approved already, 170,000 square feet. It was designed to be an environmentally sensitive mixed-use development for owner-occupied, rental, retail, office, restaurant space, and that's still approved for that today. The 94 condos are not restricted to for sale. They can all be rented to students, and that is the hottest market in Athens for condominiums. The site will be primarily plant-based agriculture. We want to introduce animals at a very small scale in order to increase the biodiversity of the farm, which will enhance the nutritional content and the quality of the food that we plan to grow there. I live in the neighborhood. This has been my family's home for over 70 years. We don't want to do anything that's going to negatively impact the neighborhood or Athens. So I believe this will be a strong asset for Athens and will enhance property values in the neighborhood and make it a more desirable neighborhood to live in. So I thank you for your time and ask you for your support time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Deagle. Do we have others who would like to speak in favor of this application?
No, we do not.
All right. Then we will move to anyone who would like to speak in opposition. Do we have anyone present who would like to speak in? Yes.
Yes, Madam Chair, members of members of the Planning Commission. My name is Ethan Underwood. I'm an attorney with the firm of Miles Hansford Talent. We are representing Marcia Crossing, and as Mr. Deagle noted, our client is the developer of Lakewood, and they have grave concerns about this development and are opposed to it. The problem we've got is, at one point in time, this would have been a good idea had everyone known what the deal was, but the deal's changing. Our client has invested millions and millions of dollars, and homeowners have invested hundreds of thousands of dollars each into homes into an area that what was planned in front, they knew what the deal was going in. But what was planned in front was for sale product, condominiums and townhomes. Now, they've been threatened and said, well, if you don't approve this, we're going to put a bunch of for rent products out there. We don't think that, one, is proper. Two, we don't think that complies with ordinance. But more importantly, let's be honest about what this is. I mean, it's an event facility. They want to hold weddings in a residential neighborhood. Now, I mean, we've all been to weddings. We know what happens, especially at a really good one. They're loud. They last a long time. They got people who are out disturbing things if it's a good party. And that's what this is designed to be, is a party facility in the middle of a residential neighborhood. It will change the traffic patterns. Maybe you're not having as many folks that would come in and out who are residences who actually have ownership in the property and have a stake in it. But you got a lot of transient folks that are coming in large slobs where the traffic may all be at one time, but it may be hundreds of cars. The streets were not designed for that. In fact, frankly, the people in the residents in Lakewood, they didn't buy into that. So we would ask that you do not approve this. We would certainly submit to you that a 5 or even a 10-foot buffer is completely inadequate to buffer anyone's privacy, especially with large parties that would be at an event facility. We do also want to point out that looking at the original plan, this was named to be condo apartments, and it distinguished specifically between condo apartments, garden apartments, town center apartments. These were designed to be lower intensity, owner-occupied units. And what we're submitting to you now is you're changing, if this is approved, the very nature of this development and what everybody thought the deal was when they bought in. Again, had this been part of the design and presented and said, okay, yeah, we're all going to buy into this at the origination, that's great. But now you're really changing what they relied upon. And I think they've got a right to rely upon the plan that they bought into. As stated, that farm animals, they will produce onerous smells and noises, but frankly, that's really just to attract parties. I mean, it's designed to have a farm theme, but it's an event facility. So the question is it proper to put a party facility in the middle of a residential neighborhood? We'd submit to you, you need those, but not right there, not especially when you've already had so many folks buy in. We'd request that you recommend denial of this. We're happy to answer any questions that you have.
Thank you. Do we have any other people who would like to speak in opposition to this application?
We do not.
All right. And so, Mr. Coons, you need your 2 minutes.
Well, thank you, Madam Chair. I certainly appreciate Mr. Underwood's responses, and I don't disagree. There's an understanding of what this development would be. We certainly acknowledge that. We just see this as a positive change, and most of the feedback that Shane has received to date feels similar to that. So we're certainly sympathetic to that cause, but we've also feel like we've gotten a lot of support in response to this that maybe differentiates the residential interests from the business interests, to be quite honest.
Thank you very much. And so now we'll move behind the rail and give time for our planning commissioners to discuss or ask questions. Mr. Scarborough.
I have a couple of questions for Mr. Coons, if he could step to the podium. You talked about having the first 6, I believe it was, cottages before the entire development. Where would the parking be for those?
So there's actually on-street parking directly in front of those cottages.
Okay,
and,
so
yeah,
nothing back in the property.
No, sir.
And there's not room for hundreds of cars to park anywhere in this proposed plan, are there?
Within the fields, yes. For the event facilities.
The fields presumably would be full of crops or animals. I just heard the objection, and one of the objections was hundreds of cars being coming in, and
we don't have that much room. Yes, I see where you're going.
So, okay, all right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Are I do want to say that I appreciate that. I appreciate that my comments were heard about the tree line. I'm glad to see that it looks like you came up with a plan that addressed both tree cover and has the additional effect of shading, especially in the evening as these events get underway, shading the vehicles. And, you know, I always love a good shady parking place. So it is shading the pavement too, frankly. So that I see that as a plus, and I'm glad that worked out. And I guess my only other comment for right now is that the objection we heard was from the developer of the homes, but I didn't hear anything from anybody who actually lives in the homes or is contemplating buying a home there or owns a lot there or anything. So I think that's significant. And so that's all I have to say right now.
Thank you, Mr. Scarborough. Anyone else? Yes, Kristen, Ms. Morales.
So I guess I have just two questions. The note about the gates for that, I forget how it was described, but I guess where there's like that sort of circle at Indiana and Edgewater Drive, is that gate essentially there as like fire access? Would that gate ever really be open as like a general driveway?
On a daily basis, that gate would be closed, as would the front gate, and that's really just part of the farm operations. Traffic, when I say traffic, farm-related vehicles, whether that's the farm truck coming in and out, could use that gate, but the gate would always be closed. It's just sort of part of securing the perimeter. When traffic for events is anticipated, they would be directed towards Deacle Drive and that entry. If somebody were to show up at the Indiana Avenue entrance, they would let them in. It's not like they would probably make them drive around. So that would accommodate entrance. It's really the exiting and potential having a lot of people exiting at one time that was part of the bigger concern. And in that case, we wouldn't let anybody exit from that location after an event.
Okay. Yeah, because I know if there's a lot of pushback from residents on Edgewater Drive, but if there's not going to be traffic going through there, I mean, that kind of gives us some peace of mind as far as that goes. The only other question I had, I know there was some concern, whether from staff or I know some members of the commission too, maybe about the phasing in terms of the short-term rentals and the event space itself. And I feel like the general consensus was that because the cottages were connected with the event, those two would kind of go in tandem. So by having a set number of cottages built first, I guess how can we ensure that the project proceeds as planned and it becomes this fully developed facility rather than just a couple of short-term rentals up on the hill?
Yeah. That's a great question. You know, and I don't know if Shane has the opportunity to answer that. I think, you know, we just sort of believe in the success of this idea, to be perfectly honest with you. I don't know how we can guarantee that, but we know that it has been a successful model demonstrated by locations like the Julep Farms, where they're not even an operating farm. That's what's kind of interesting. It's really just an aesthetic that people like being a part of. And it is also, you know, a revenue stream that we see helping the phase one of this farm get started with. And the success of that phase one ultimately leads to the success of phase two. But we don't have any guarantees in place that we can really make. I mean, we're depending on a successful project.
All right. Do we have, did someone else have their hand up? I think I saw a hand. Yes, Ms. Beresford. Sarah.
I've got a couple questions. The first one is for Josh. So could you just specifically real quick respond to staff's 3 recommendations, the extent to which you all will or will not be able to accommodate them?
And I'm sorry, I don't have them here in front of me, but it's okay. I know one was gating the exit drive at Indiana, which we're we're happy to comply with, and that is not a problem. The other is just correcting some of my typos on the square footages, I think, which no problem there. I'm happy to do that. I think we would like to reserve our request for greater than 10,000 square feet for the eventual event space. And again, that's really all about trying to make sure that we have a space that can be successful. It doesn't necessarily mean we're trying to get more people, but when you talk to people that are looking for spaces like that, it's not just the room where people can go, but it's also the kitchen that allows them to cook, not necessarily just be a warming kitchen. It's also a place that if this was a dedicated caterer, they can have chilled storage. So there's just a lot of support that goes into that. The outdoor pavilions, which are a significant part of that number, really are just support structures. They're not necessarily more buildings to have more events or even separate events. So we'd like to sort of have that flexibility to make that number work. In regard to the cottages, I think it's a great question by Ms. Morales. Just, how do we feel about pushing that off? And I would sort of respond with, how do we feel about having short-term stays accommodated with a farm? I mean, it's been proven, it works well. The infrastructure's there. We're not really having to create anything new to make it happen.
My understanding, and pardon me for interrupting you.
That's okay.
My understanding is that staff's recommendation has more to do with the order
that they happen.
The order of the construction, that the COs for the cabins wouldn't be issued until the facility was completed.
And I think that's where we're just asking for a slight separation from the cottages being associated solely with the event facility and having some cottages associated with people who might like a farm stay. Okay. And so, we've talked about that internally. It's important to us. Shane and I both sort of just feel like, based on the things that we've seen and research, that it definitely can work. We're open to decreasing the number. If 6 is too many, and it sort of starts to work towards something we don't want to see if the event facility were not to happen. 3, I think, is something that Shane feels like would be a very comfortable minimum if we could still work with something like that to minimize any impact that you might foresee in having those there in phase 1. So.
Okay. And just a couple of things. I personally don't see a problem with 6. That's not problematic for me at all. I really like this project. I really like that you all responded to our concerns that we expressed last time. I appreciate your neighborhood engagement. I think that was really important. I do really hear and respect what the attorney for Marcia's Crossing has to say. I do think this is a very special piece of property. I wasn't around when the initial PD was put into place, and I just would state that I think this is a great use of this property and a way to sort of retain what it is that's beautiful about it. I have a question for staff, more to do with sort of what you can and can't do in a binding site plan. Because if I were a neighbor, I would care. So for example, can you include animal density in a binding site plan? And can you include gate timing, gates open and closing in a site plan, in a binding site plan? You know what I mean? Like, that's less about a spatial thing that's represented on the plan and more about programming and activities on the property. And how does that work?
I mean, the way it works, basically, you've got a binding site plan, but the report that was written that goes along with the plan also ultimately would be stamp binding. So information provided, for example, animal density, they could provide a maximum number of agricultural animals in that report. You really can't show that on a plan, but you could list that as a standard within the report. And once it becomes binding, it is then enforceable from a staff standpoint in terms of number of of animals.
And then the same thing with the gate.
Yes.
Okay. And right now in the applicant's report, I can't remember right this second. Is there something in there about the gate being closed, or is that just in the staff recommendations?
I'm gonna ask Josh on that one.
Yeah, I believe we did note that, Brad. If it's not specifically noted, we can add that as part of the conditions and what's sent to the mayor and commissioners. We do have animal density in the report. I just want to note that too.
Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Matt, Mr. Hall.
Yeah, I had, I guess, one comment and then just a couple of clarifying questions about some of the staff recommended conditions. And my comment is, I think this is a wonderful project. An urban farm event space seems like a great thing to have in Athens, and I like the location for this. It seems clear to me that the Deacle family is as or more invested in this area as anyone else, and have all the incentives to make this be a wonderful enhancement to the neighborhood rather than just a cash grab. And if anything, I would imagine that the value of the property, if it were developed into 115 condos, which it's currently approved for, might be more. So it strikes me that the Deacles have the right idea and the right incentives here. I do have a couple of questions about some of on the conditions. The first staff condition says the private drive shall be gated after events so as not to allow departing traffic to use Indiana Avenue. And just to clarify, does that mean shall be gated after the beginning of events? Because if a wedding, is from 5 p.m. to 11 p.m., that condition seems to say that it's got to be gated after the event is over, as opposed to, which wouldn't prevent departing traffic. So I just wanted to ask clarification of staff of what was intended in that language.
I think that's a valid point, and it may be a little clearer. The intent of it was that, once the event is up and running and ongoing, then it's gated. We didn't really say that clearly. I think you could change the language if you felt that it was more clear that the private drive shall be gated during and after events, or something along those lines, so that once the event is started and you certainly may not have everybody leaving at the same time, you don't have a constant stream of traffic leaving via Indiana during the event until it's all over and you get the final rush. So we would be fine with that, of changing that language.
Okay, that was our understanding, Brad, just by the way.
Okay.
Yeah, the other condition or question I had on the subject of conditions, the staff report mentions this 10,000 square foot commercial limitation and says, there's insufficient justification for the waiver to exceed that. I appreciated the applicant's explanation of why that is both beneficial to the project and beneficial to the neighbors as far as bringing, providing more support space that's interior to reduce noise and so on. But I didn't see a condition about that in the staff conditions. And so am I right to understand that staff was not proposing a condition to reduce the requested square footage from the 13,000 number to 10,000?
Rick, you want to take that one?
Yeah, I think we had talked about that it's not just being retail, which I first was thinking about, but also about other uses. And Josh mentioned the other possible uses for that space. So yeah, we ended up in the end. I think that concern was meant to be taken out, to be truthful. Yes, we didn't put it as a condition at the end. I did want to mention at the bottom of page 2 on the application report, Josh had mentioned a voluntary condition about closing Indiana Avenue entrance to exiting traffic after the event, and so directing traffic to Deacle Drive. And we were looking for a physical barrier, and that just adding basically to that condition that there be a physical barrier. And so you already have a gate there, so we were just saying basically keep the gate closed as a part of that condition. So.
Okay. And then the last, I guess this is back in the nature of a comment. I appreciate the applicant's explanation of the sequencing, and it strikes me that the short-term rental on a farm site, I understand why that would be attractive to some people, and I would not have a problem with that personally. So my inclination at this point, subject to hearing what other people have to say, might be to approve with the first two staff conditions, but not the third.
Ms. Kinman, Alice?
Thank you. I agree with everything that has just been said. I think all my notes have been covered by people who've already spoken on this project. I'll address the last thing that Matt was talking about, the issue of the rental cabins. When I first read the staff report, I was very much in favor of that condition. But as we listen to more about what this project is trying to achieve, and also, to be honest, an event facility in the time of COVID is probably not going to be a revenue stream anytime real soon. I am really confident that we can this use can handle short-term rental in a really responsible way, and bring people here who will stay in these cabins for a few nights and have a lovely experience, and give them a little bit of a revenue stream. And we're the Planning Commission, and we're not supposed to be concerned about that. So disclaimer there, but it does make sense to me. If other planning commissioners are uncomfortable, I'd be happy to go with the suggested compromise of 3. But I think I would be also willing to accept all 6. Yes, Ms. Goodrum is.
I wanted to ask staff if there were any harmful effects of short-term rentals that they wanted to point out to us that haven't been noted, even if they were the only thing that was developed.
I mean, I think short-term rentals, it depends on the person a lot. We currently really don't have language in our ordinance that regulates them at all, hence the need to ask for the waiver to call them a motel. These are a little bit isolated from neighbors. Generally, where we see concerns with short-term rentals are either, a house in a neighborhood that has largely been converted to that, and then if you are a neighbor, you tend to have different neighbors 2 or 3 times a week potentially. So you never really know who's next door to you, and people have concerns with that. The other issue is just, the reliability of an owner as it relates to people that come to town to Athens that went to school here. And I know at least my friend group that share that same kind of description. When they come back up here, they tend to act like they're in college again. And, and so we do have some issues with regulation of parties and events going late into evenings and things like that. I know the mayor and commission are working on some language in an ordinance that may address some of that, but that's largely our concern. It's just the ability really not to regulate it very strictly.
Thank you. Any other questions? Mr. Scarborough.
Well, I just want to comment now that I've heard everybody else. I've been around Athens long enough to remember when Barnett Shoals Road was the edge of the world, and to watch what's developed up and down this particular piece of Barnett Shoals, and thinking about what is already a part of the original plan for this piece of property. I do recognize that there would be some apprehension to having animals and farms and traffic and other things, but I think that this helps preserve a little bit of green space out there and a little bit of something more rural and something more like what it was like out here before everybody else got here. I think it's been handled in a sensitive way. I think that some of the conditions that we put on will help even more to ensure that there's very little impact on the existing neighborhood. I don't think that I've worked around animals in my professional life for a long time, and I understand that when you concentrate them, they do have odors and problems that drift off the property, but a few animals are rarely any more of a problem than anything else that might be found on a piece of commercial or multifamily residential property. So I think that this really is a good project and a really nice thing for this piece of property on this side of town. And the phasing of it and the thought that, well, we're going to start with this, which as a agritourism is an interesting notion, and I kind of like the sound of that. And I would hope that and I have no objection to the cottages there are directly on Deacle Drive being developed as an agritourism location. And so I think the two phases of it are a good plan and a path forward that really has some expectation of success. And the whole thing just looks like a good idea. So I'm happy.
Thank you.
Do we have other comments? I have one comment. I think there is a correction needed on page 4. It said, I think this was probably from the previous application earlier, that there are 8 waivers. I think they're just 6. So that, Jim, that sounds like something you would have found. How in the world would I find that? And you didn't. I do want to thank the applicant and Mr. Cooks for taking special care with the Indiana Avenue entrance. I think that was a real need, and I appreciate taking care of that and your willingness to do that. I'm on the fence. I can go either way with the rentals. And I think the Deacles are not leaving this property, so that's the issue of a confidence that it gives us. But what you don't want is for the people who are as invested as these folks are to get the short terms up and running, and then maybe the barn doesn't happen. Maybe maybe we don't go on with it. I think for me, that's what you don't want. But I have confidence that won't happen. How's that? Boy, remind me I said that. But I do have the confidence that the people who are doing this probably want it to be good even more than we do. So at this point, then, yes, Jeff.
Well, I was going to offer a motion when you think it's appropriate.
Those were the words that were coming out of my mouth. Go right ahead. Thank you.
Okay, I'd like to make a motion to approve with conditions, and those conditions being staff's condition number 1 and staff's condition number 2 that about departing traffic and correcting the square footage of the structures. And then I'd like to modify staff's condition number 3 to the 6 cottages on Deacle Drive may be occupied prior to the completion of the rest of the facility, but no more than those 6.
Okay. Do we have a second? We have a second.
Could I make just one quick friendly amendment?
Yes.
I'd like to add that the language in the applicant's report be clarified about the gate on Indiana Drive. And if the motioner will take that friendly amendment, we'll be happy to second.
Can I modify my motion just a little bit?
Oh, I hope someone's keeping up with this. Yes, go ahead, Mr. Scarborough.
Staff's condition number 1 should be modified to note that traffic should be, the gate should be closed on Indiana Drive at the start of any event and remain closed beyond the end of the event in order to route traffic onto Deagle Drive.
Okay.
So approve with the gate being closed during and after events, correcting the square footage, and allowing no more than 6 cottages until the entire project is completed.
All right, and we had a second.
Yes, I second that.
Thank you, Ms. Kinman. Do we have any questions or any discussion before we move to a vote? All right, then, Mr. Akalik, would you call the roll, please?
Scarborough?
Yes.
Tucker?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Beresford?
Yes.
Goodrum?
Yes.
Paul?
Yes.
Kinman?
Yes.
Morales?
Yes.
And Rowland?
I would say Rowland will probably abstain at best on this one since she just joined us.
Okay.
Okay.
It's unanimous.
Thank you, everyone. We certainly appreciate the support.
Thank you very much. Unanimous with 1 abstention.
Yeah.
All right. And so we are now going to move. Everyone can shift papers. I don't know why. I always find it more difficult, more challenging to shift papers at home than I did when we were all sitting together.
While you're doing that, Madam Chair, Lucy will explain your abstention in the pink sheet when it goes forward. We're glad you got your power on and you're back with us. So welcome.
Absolutely. I hope your limb didn't do a lot of damage. Did it?
Maxine, it didn't kill anybody, and that was really important. It was a big limb.
Good. Well, we're glad you made it. Thank you for getting here. All right. We are going now to move to the concept paper, concept review for Old Elberton Road. This is case number CON-2020-08-2308. And this is an application that a concept review allows the applicant to get feedback from the commission, to understand if there are questions by commission members that they need to provide answers to before an application is brought to us. But this is solely for the purpose of providing information, and we will not be taking a vote on this tonight. The voting time will be in the future when the applicant brings the application officially back to us. So, but I think we will run this like we run the all of our other applications. So let's first start with staff, who can give us information about the application.
Okay, this request is to a rezoning, proposed rezoning from agricultural residential to commercial rural and single family plan development. Again, as a concept idea. This is the location map. You can see the property fronts Old Elberton Road. It's actually a part of a larger tract that also fronts Lim Edwards, but that northern part would not be involved. You can see the Coyle Middle School there to the south. And it's nearly across from the Pittard Road intersection. Okay, here's the aerial view showing the property today and how it's undeveloped. I believe it's in a conservation use, a lot of wooded acreage. There's also some ponds on the site. The rural future land use would need to change. We didn't get a exact proposed designation, but that would need to change. You can see around there it's just rural government for the school and then employment. The zoning would change if this comes back through again as a formal application. The request would be have some commercial there in the corner by Old Elberton, across from Pittard, and then the rest of it as single family. Okay, so the request has a multitude of residential type of uses: single family, duplex, multifamily. Also introduce some commercial uses. The total number of dwellings altogether is 850. Again, the site is taking over 200 acres away from a 366 acre total tract. 91 acres would be conserved as open space. So there are a number of waivers that would be needed, and that's I think these are in the report. For tree canopy coverage, lot coverage, front setback, residential floor area, and the mass grading restriction has to waive that. This is the rendering, the color rendering that was given for the site plan. See the commercial up in the top left corner, and some mixture of multifamily clusters, and then the basically open space towards the back around the pond and stormwater areas. The proposed zoning line would take the commercial buildings as well as some multifamily buildings into a commercial area, village center, so to say, and then again, single family and some multifamily in an RS zone was proposed. Phasing would include primarily the village center is half the village center, and then some single family, leaving some other multifamily buildings for phase 2, as well as some single family lots here. Phase 3 would be the northern. It's actually skewed, so the northern part is actually this way in phase 3, and so that would be left as as phase 3. Some of the comments and staff, the analysis as much as we could of the information given. So it's not a very detailed analysis, but Utilities has mentioned that for sewer to serve such a dense site, they would need to have an approved pump station by the mayor and commission. And so they've asked the applicant to make sure they talk to Utilities Department about those plans. A traffic study is needed for a traffic engineer. Definitely a development this size, need to make sure that the intersections nearby can handle such traffic, especially at peak hours with a school next door. Pretty much, we would think a vast majority of the trips would turn left out of the development heading towards Athens and go past the school. So certain hours, definitely peak hours, would need to be studied for possible road improvements. Concern with the proposed zoning, this is planning staff's concern with proposed zoning and the designations that have been proposed, as well as the future land use, because we just don't have anything out there in that part of the county. We're surrounded by rural, industrial, and just a school nearby. So everything else is rural, agricultural land, and so this would be just kind of it's large but rather an isolated type development out there. We do have a concern also with our industrial right across Old Elberton. A lot of times industrial does not want to invest in property if they know it's going to be right across from dense residential development. So we do have industrial zone there, and we do have a concern with the effect on investment or reinvestment in the industrial uses on that side. Again, the concern with the peak hour trips with the school traffic. Our transportation corridor concept map, it's official adopted map for planning future connections in Athens, and we do have a future connector road going through the property. Those aren't directly planned routes, or more of a general concept, but we do show in this general area across this property somewhere a connection to Old Alberton. And then we have some other detailed comments, more micromanaged comments in the staff report. I won't go through all those at this time. Just wanted to show again, more of a broader view of the zoning in the area, the star representing the approximate location. Again, we just don't have anything but the industrial, government, and rural, agricultural, residential. This is the future land use, pretty much all rural and industrial. And so that concludes the staff report.
Thank you very much, Rick. All right. I think at this time we need to hear from the applicant, and I think I saw Mr. Tumlin is with us in the Zoom. And so, Mr. Tumlin, if you would provide us with information about this, the conceptual information about this area.
Yes, ma'am. My name is Johnny Tumlin with 240 Lim Edwards Road, Winterville, Georgia. I appreciate your time to make this a mission development come together. Rick, could you show slide number 1 from us, please?
Okay. Is this the first one, or is this, you want to go forward?
I think that's it. Okay. Homestead is a mission development with a goal of having affordable and workforce housing for Athens-Clarke County area. We have committed 20% of the housing to be affordable and trust to have restricted deed to that 20% to keep it affordable for perpetuity. This is 233 acres tract that's almost 40% open space and parks. That's 90 acres that will be forever for the homeowners to enjoy: nature trails, multi-use sports fields, football, soccer, baseball, pool, and cabana. The village center, there'll be coffee shops, bakeries, farmers market. The lake will be part of this park setting with trails and a fishing dock. Streams are in the open space areas. Can you go to slide number 2, please? With approximately 43,000 jobs in Athens-Clarke County, almost 2/3 of them are commuting from surrounding areas. That's almost 29,000 people having to commute into our area from outside to work in this beautiful Athens area. Just in Athena Park, there's 7,000 jobs and growing. When looking at a 5-mile radius of the area staying within the county, out of 11,000 jobs, only 1,200 people live in the area they work. There's such a demand for affordable housing and workforce housing. It is our mission to provide this for the community. We want school teachers, firefighters, county workers, factory workers, and everyday good people to be able to live close to where they work. This helps with traffic and pollution. It creates a community feel. People would know their neighbors, look after each other. The kids can walk to Coyle Middle School. They will have trails and a lake to fish, play sports on, and enjoy everyday outdoor activities. We hope that to have a daycare in one of the commercial tracks. This will help working parents conveniently take kids to daycare and stay within their community. The teachers at Coyle can afford to live in the community and be able to walk to work. Think of how good that would be for the kids to grow up in this environment. Can you go to slide number 3, please? The majority of the development would be in what is already open fields. When the development is complete, there will be more trees there now than there are now. The streets are all tree lined and all yards will be sodded. There will be sidewalks along both sides of the roads with trees planted between the curb and the sidewalk. The sidewalks are spaced back far enough that trees have room to grow. This will make for an additional walking areas and help connect the community. Interior streets will have single-family detached homes with garages and driveways into the street. These streets do not have street parking. The interior streets will have alley-fed lots that will have on-street parking, normally on both sides of the road. There will be limited road access from the alleyways. The homes will be able to walk up from the streets to the front porches and visit their neighbors. This will give a greater pedestrian experience. The neighborhood is designed with a village center that is almost 23 acres that contains mixed-use structures, both commercial and residential. Can you go to slide number 4, please, Rick? There will be a mix of townhomes, commercial shops, coffee shops, small restaurants, maybe even a small farmer's market. On the street, the on-street parking will be ideal for a food truck day that can be planned so that you get the night off of cooking. All shops will be designed to have larger than normal outside dining. We have learned that fresh air and plenty of room is the way to go in today's environment. Since we first started design, it has changed a lot in how we think about open space. Before it was nice, now it's a must. We are providing an open environment for kids to grow up and enjoy. Lots of trails to walk or bike, lakes to enjoy, and a beauty of the outdoors. Protecting streams to walk along and forest to explore. Sports field to play outside in the fresh air. The area along Old Elberton will have a 125-foot setback to provide open space along the corridor and providing for the future fly-fly trail to connect the community with Winterville, Athens, and possibly Hull. Go, please. I know traffic is a big concern of the area. We are in the process of conducting a traffic impact analysis to find out what needs to be done and what can be done. The western corner of the property is about a 5-minute walk to city transit. The bus stop at Spring Valley and Bold is Route 30 on the north side circulator, operating 7 days a week and in the evenings. The route stops at the Kroger Marketplace and the growing development node around Athens-Tech. Now let's talk about what I said earlier about the employment in the area. How many people have to live outside of the area and commute into Athena Park on a daily basis? Most of them are already on the roads that you are concerned with, and if they lived here at Homestead, they'd already be home and off the road. The middle school kids could walk to school in the morning and even possibly walk to daycare after school. I'm sure somebody will be there to walk them to the daycare. This may even reduce the cars at school in the carpool line. Teachers would walk with the kids to school. Parents going to work will have a 1 to 5 mile drive. You're just 2 miles from the loop. You always hear of live, work, and play community. Well, now you will have it. Great homes that are affordable for everyday people and not just the wealthy. Good people deserve great homes and great community. Athens-Clarke County is a great place to be and work, and that will be affordable to live here as well. Athens really struggles with having affordable homes because of all the student housing. Homestead is targeted for working class of Athens-Clarke County. It is designed to be family-oriented and community-focused. We have a great church at the intersection of Old Elberton and Vols. I met with Dr. Washington and Avita Thornton to discuss this development. I was inspired and impressed by Dr. Washington and what he is doing for the youth in the community. I'm so proud to know that we have such great community leaders and hope that everyone gets to meet and know all the amazing people in our community. You can live in Homestead community and walk, bike, or ride public transit to work, the grocery store, or even Athens, Winterville, or surrounding areas and never drive a car. I know all good old Americans will drive somewhere, but this could be a start to change the way we live and think about our communities. Slide 6, please. Back to the mission of affordable and workforce housing, or the missing middle. There will be a cooperative effort from Athens-Clarke County and Homestead to provide 20% of the homes to be affordable. We also have a workforce housing. That's just a step up in the price, but to handle it as a normal housing. Then you'll have some higher price points as the area will allow. Athens-Clarke County needs the housing. We need it as a community to keep our good people close to their families, their schools, their church, and their jobs. A place to call home, a homestead to raise their family and grow old in an environment that is, you just don't want to leave. Welcome to Homestead. You'll be proud to call it. I know you have some in the community with concerns, and I'll be happy to answer any questions I have. This will be a development that you'll be proud to have as your neighbor. That's really all I got, and I'll be happy. I'm sure we got plenty of questions, and I'd be happy to answer anything they have.
Thank you, Mr. Tumlin. I think that we will now hear people who might want to express their support for an application like this?
There are none.
There are no. Okay, then we will move to hearing from any people who might like to express opposition to a concept like this in this place.
We have a few.
Good evening. My name is Gary Whitworth. I live at 398 Deering Street. I have been here in the real estate business for the past 48 years, and most of that time I have spent in Athena Industrial Park, and have been successful in bringing a lot of companies here that are now in our park, and hiring people for the community. But I'm really concerned. I have the property across the road from this development that we're discussing, and I feel like there are things that if this project is approved, it will affect the industrial area. And I give you an example with the school, the middle school. They're at the time, and this has been years ago when it came through and it was approved, a lot of people wanted it somewhere else, not adjoining the industrial park. And what happened due to that, all you got to do is look at your map and you see that purple area there. That was down zones from industrial to EO. And it affected, there's 250 acres that joins, that is that tract of land. And approximately 60 acres of it has been put into a new, that's a split zone on the property. But what we don't want to see is this to happen. We've got 206 acres across the road. There's a space there that could easily, the terrain is just perfect for 1 million square feet. And that's, working with industry and trade with the state, we get those liquors, and we got one, Caterpillar. I was fortunate enough to work on that, and there was, where they wanted to be, there was only one tract of land, and that was on the Orkin property that it fit. But if we affect this property and with a residential development there, that's likely to happen. You're going to see some downtime on that property. But I think it's too dense. Too many houses are there. You've got, I don't know, I don't think the county has ever approved a lift station. And there's one, though, that George Chandler told me about that, of course, it takes the sewage, it comes from Winterville down to behind Walmart and lifts it back into the system. But traffic, there are a lot of reasons to deny this, and I hope he will. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to speak in opposition to this concept in this place? That's what I keep needing to call it. It's not really an application. So,
hi, good evening. My name is Sarah Williamson. I am a resident of Winterville, Georgia, 280 Smoky Road. And I have very serious concerns over the size of the development concept. I second the gentleman before me. There needs to be industrial space. There needs to be agricultural space. It's purposeful. You can't take all the space that's available and make it housing for a city that unwisely took away affordable housing for student housing. Without the industry, without the agricultural land, we really risk turning this area into something that the residents don't want. We moved to this area because of the rural area, because of the types of businesses that are there. And ideally, this concept does look appealing. Everyone likes the idea. I'm a mother, I have small children. We love the idea of a community with green space and play space, and it's safe, and it's by a school, and it has sidewalks. But when you're talking about 850 units, our children aren't going to be on the sidewalks or in the streets because it's going to be full of cars in the neighborhood constantly. It's nice to think that there's a farmer's market and there's a bakery and there's a coffee shop in your village center, but you can't guarantee those are the types of businesses that are going to take those spaces. So my concern is the quantity of the proposed concept of the development, not so much the development itself. Although I do ask you to take into consideration preserving agricultural use and industrial use areas. I moved away from Atlanta because of developments such as this, where driveways are on top of each other and garages are on top of each other. And you can't take advantage of playing in the street or playing on your sidewalks because there's so many units in the development. It's just a constant amount of vehicles coming through. So just present my concern before you as a resident and a mother. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to speak in opposition to this idea?
My name is Hardy Edwards. I'm an Athens-Clarke County and Winterville native. I live on 505 Lim Edwards Road. I actually own 400 acres surrounding this property. And actually the last 2 years, I actually have farmed this property. You know, a lot of folks don't realize that the northeast corner where this property is, that's in the Broad River Soil and Water Conservation District. It's not in the Oconee River Soil and Water Conservation District. This reason you're going to have a lift station in this property is because you're going to have to lift it back into the Oconee River Soil and Water Conservation District. The ridge that divides the two districts, Broad River and Oconee River, runs from, you go to where Los Reyes is on 29, come back Harb Mathis Road, come out Pittard Road, then head on down into Winterville and head out towards Crawford. That's actually the ridge that divides the two water conservation districts. Another point is that with the sewer, you know, the sewer lines that were built out that way, they were built to serve industry, future industry. And if you put 850 units out there, you are going to really take away from what was meant to be industrial development. And that's another reason that you're going to, you know, curtail industrial development for land that we've approved out there. And then another thing I'd just like to drive on, there's no question that this property is in the Greenbelt. The Greenbelt was derived by Athens-Clarke County in the 1990s to preserve agricultural land and green space. And, you know, if the commission approves this thing, you've pierced the shield of the Greenbelt. And the Athens-Clarke County officials that I've spoken to said that at that point, they really don't have the legal remedy of the courts to prevent all the rest of the ag land in the Greenbelt from being developed. So I need for y'all to take into consideration. I mean, there are dozens of reasons why you wouldn't want to build this thing, but I'm just, you know, kind of hitting on my 2 or 3 that I can talk about. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak in opposition to this idea?
Thank you, and thank you for allowing me to speak to this commission tonight. I am George Chandler. I live at 106 South Main Street in Winterville, Georgia, and I stand in opposition to this request. I retired about 15 years ago from the Athens-Clarke County Public Utility Department as the utility engineer. My principal task was to plan, evaluate, and or design and bring services into existing with all the Clarke County Department water and sewer system. We evaluated all projects to ensure that water and sewer capacity existed and that capacity was sufficient to serve the project that was proposed without overloading or stressing the capacity of the system being evaluated. This project basically lies in the Broad River drainage basin, which means that the current sewer system will not be allowed to serve this project without a lift station. It has been a long-standing policy of Athens-Clarke County that lift stations would not be approved. Athens-Clarke County currently only has one lift station that lies within the Oconee River drainage basin and none in the Broad River drainage basin. I've been in discussions with the Public Utility Department and learned that an evaluation of the water and sewer system has not been performed and that an evaluation has not even been requested. Now, a project of this size could have been planned without an evaluation of water and sewer capacity, subject this government to a significant financial burden in that the sewer capacity may well be exceeded and not be available to serve the important and industrial zones by gravity that the sewer system is designed to serve directly across the road from this project. The subject property is currently zoned AR and development is limited to a single residential unit for each 10 acres. Approving this rezone request violates the green belt existing along the eastern boundaries of the county. I request that you deny this rezone and maintain the AR zone development at a single family residence for 10 acres. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to speak in opposition to this?
Yes, ma'am, Madam Chair. My name is Underwood. I'm a resident of Athens-Clarke County in Winterville, lifelong, and I live on Lem Edwards Road, and a lot of my concerns have been expressed. The green belt that was designed for this area, of course, that would drastically reduce the wildlife habitat if a housing development of this nature come through there. And as a taxpayer of the Athens-Clarke County, I just would be afraid that there would be a tremendous amount of financial burden that would fall on the county, the Athens-Clarke County, in concern with services, so forth. The other thing that I'd like to mention, I tried to put this into perspective of size-wise, something that you could think about, and that is that Winterville is a 2.65 square miles in land mass, and that's approximately 1,700 acres. And the population there is 1,271. And this proposal on this land is like 7 times less the size of Winterville, and probably the population, you could say, would be 4 to 5 times more. So we just feel that this would be almost standing room only for a population this size in an area this size. And I just also spoke with Mr. Washington too at the church, and he was telling me that one event that they had here recently at his church, that the traffic already was backed up past the pitted road, and it was my understanding that the traffic was backed up down Moores Grove Road as well. So it just seemed like a project like this would adversely affect the residents on Pitted Road and the residents on Spring Valley Road. We have a nice subdivision down Spring Valley Road, Thomas Farms, and we feel like that it would really adversely affect it as well. And I strongly urge you to deny this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is there anyone else who would like to speak in opposition?
Good evening. My name is Doug Griffin. I live at 290 Old Overton Road. Our driveway runs along the southwest portion of this property and then turns and runs across another side of it, and we are built behind it. When this property changed hands in 2002, we purchased 50 acres back there. We are builders. My wife is a well-known residential builder here in town, and developers. So we did develop that 50 acres with 4 residential properties. So that's about 12.5 acres per unit. Our impervious surface coverage is less than 0.5% on 50 acres. So you can see that our idea for development was perhaps somewhat different than what this is. My concern, if I were sitting in your chair, and I have sat in the chair, I've been a part of the commission, is that if you take the future land use plan, which was amended recently in 2018, originally came about in 2005, if you begin this 2018 amendment by basically negating it, that you set a precedent. And precedents are very, very difficult because the next person may come along and submit exactly the same thing, and we've already voted something in, and so we get in a spot. So I would say that we need to. By the way, let me say this. I appreciate your service to this committee and to this community. And I also appreciate the service of the dozens of people and thousands of hours of time that were put into this future land use plan. And for us to somehow waiver that, it seems to me we should think about that very carefully. Naturally, myself and my wife are very interested in this. We live right next to it. My mother-in-law, who is here tonight, the aspects of this would back up to her back door. And so let me encourage you to use great judgment. There are 8 waivers, as I counted, called for by this. It just doesn't make any sense to me. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Do we have someone else who would like to speak?
I'm glad to take the mask off. Yes, I think I'm the last one. I'm Karen Griffin. Doug, my husband, we bought this property in 2002. As he said, we were part of the 366 acres that adjoined that. Our 50 acres was actually landlocked in the back. We couldn't even get to it without buying the driveway to go down. The use, and then I think in 2003, maybe Mr. Ewing bought the property, who is Mr. Chunlin's father-in-law. But the use of the property, if you can imagine driving home and having right now we have a beautiful field with deer and everything else. Of course, it's not ours. We just own the driveway. But the deer and everything there, and now replacing it with commercial properties, with multifamily, and then the houses start, and they back up from that point all the way. There are 50 houses that I counted that are just on the outside that'll back up to our driveway, turn and go around the little pond, and then back up to my mother's property, who will actually, and as Doug said, she's here, but she will actually suffer the worst because the properties that they're implying would back straight up to her driveway. I found it a little funny that Mr. Tumlin mentioned community. The map that the Athens Planning Department sent out had the 230 acres in the middle, and it had lines all the way around it. I went and I actually put the people's names in the lines that own that property. There are 11 properties that touch this. Not one of us have gotten one phone call to discuss this property, to discuss the future of it, to go over anything. We were not included in this. Monday night, I had a couple of commissioners over in our driveway and showed them exactly where this would lie in relation to our driveway, the 50 acres, and the Woods property over on Lim Edwards Road, and also Thomas Evans' property. He couldn't be with us tonight. But then that night, Monday night, we also had a Winterville community, kind of same thing as here, except it was community. We had about 70 people that gathered with us that night. They're all in opposition. So I'm actually representing those 70 people here tonight, and I'm also representing the 50 acres that we have and the 4 owners that live there. We would really love, it's a beautiful property. I'm a builder. I've done this before. We did developments over on the east side, but we went and met with Cedar Creek Association. We had the Homeowners Association there. And we also allowed input for the Cedar Creek Association to come in and see our plans, see what we were thinking, and got their input. And then we actually worked around their thinking. And when we went to the Mayor and Commission, we had no opposition. Not one person stood up in opposing the development that we had there on Gaines School Road. So I encourage you, if you do come back, talk to your neighbors. You've heard the comments here, Mr. Tumlin. You've heard the comments. Like I said, I represent the 60 or 70 we had there Monday night. I've talked to a couple of commissioners already. We had ladies that work at Cole Middle School. Dr. Ford sent representatives for her over to our meeting Monday afternoon in the driveway. They live on the end of Pittard Road. They're concerned with the traffic from the school and also as it turns and goes down Pittard. Your development really doesn't line up with Pittard. Our driveway really lines up with Pittard, so I'm not exactly sure how Clarke County will work that out. But the way we see it, you're probably going to need a 4-lane highway and maybe a couple of red lights, one at Pittard and one at the 4-way stop. So again, I want to just kind of go over one more time. They're actually giving me 10 minutes. They're giving me 10 because Brad just came, but giving me 10 because of the, I'm representing the 50 and 70 people that were with us Monday night. Is that okay, Dr. Easton?
Yes.
Okay. I won't take 10, I promise. But just to go back over their concerns from Monday night, the school traffic, the church traffic, Dr. Ford and Pastor Washington at the church. They're concerned about the traffic. The green belt that was passed in 1999 to 2000, the green belt and the watershed problems that would be working with the water in that area. All of that water actually drains toward what would be the northeast quadrant, which goes to Charlie Bolton Road, which washed out the road and I think rendered that road null and void for about 3 weeks, not long ago. So, of course, in construction, we know that you've got to control your water. So that's a concern. The industrial sites across the street, Gary Whitworth went over that. The infrastructure is George Chandler with the lift station and the sewer line. And they say it's an 8-inch line that's been left at the school. It would have to be used. And then the wildlife and I also want to just mention that Thomas Evans' family, his son, has collected artifacts, Indian artifacts, his entire life living there. And that they have been carbon dated back to thousands of years ago. But anyway, it's just a beautiful piece of property. We understand that you can't keep things like this always, and we just would like for you to think about the things that have been discussed and do your best. But I believe in the system. I believe in all of you guys. I believe in the mayor and commission, and I believe that they told me many years ago when the flight was kind of leaving Clarke County and everybody was going to Oconee to build. They told me to go ahead and leave, that I needed to leave Clarke County and to go to Oconee County. I have stayed in Athens-Clarke County as a residential builder for 38 years, and I'm a custom home builder. And I've stayed here, and I've watched the cyclical turn back, and I've watched 5 Points come back with a vengeance. And this development is beautiful, but I just think it's in the wrong place. But thank you so much, and I appreciate your time tonight.
Thank you very much. Do we have anyone else who would like to speak in opposition to this concept in this place?
We do not.
All right, then we are going to move behind the rail and have a discussion and provide Mr. Cumlin with thoughts and opinions prior to his development of an application. Ms. Rowland, Lucy. You're on mute, Lucy. You're on mute. Lucy. Lucy.
There I go.
Okay, there you go. Sorry.
Okay. The very first thing I want everybody to know is this is a concept. It is not a rezoning. And I think everybody needs to understand that. I really love the design, but I'm not convinced this is the place to put it. And there are a lot of reasons for that, and several people spoke to that tonight. I've worked with George Chandler in the past when I was on Subdivision Review Committee a million years ago, and he's absolutely correct that we never approved lift stations. And I cannot imagine approving a lift station from one basin to another. I think that's just a really bad idea. And I think Mr. Edwards, and I remember Hardy Edwards, and he can't be the same Hardy Edwards I remember, so it has to be his son. It was the same thing. This is a sort of engineering thing that is incredibly important. These are technical issues. And even though the concept and the idea of this particular design is very good, it's really not in a very good location for a lot of reasons. And I'll continue with that. Mr. Whitworth said, and this is very cogent to our discussions and our concept plan, and our concept plans and our land use plans that we have put in place going back as far as 2000, that you design your land use plan to include very large areas, not individual lots or individual plots of, say, 200 acres here, 200 acres there. You're really looking at a large swath for industrial, and that is incredibly important to being able to have a viable commercial development area in Athens-Clarke County. And these are the kinds of things that we looked at for the first time back in 2000. Actually, it was 1998, but it actually came online in 2000. How important it was to protect your industrial areas. And that means you don't start eating away at them and saying, all right, we're going to go ahead and say this 200-acre place is going to be, we're going to turn that into a mixed-use area. That isn't how you develop a county of the size of Athens-Clarke County, unless you decide you want to make it totally residential. And going back a little bit closer in time is the cost of community services study, which was done sometime, and Brad, you probably remember this. The cost of community studies that was done when States McCarter and Tom Chasteen were on the commission. And one of the things that we did was we hired Jeff Dorfman at UGA to do that for Athens-Clarke County. And it came up with the same thing that all cost of community studies do, and that is residential does not pay for itself. You have to have agricultural, commercial, and industrial to pay for your services. And actually, I think it's time we were updating on that, but I don't know if the county commission will ever, be willing to do that. But I think it's very important that everybody on the planning commission and the public understands that cost of how you service your residential is not, in other words, unless you have a very expensive house on a very large acreage, you're not going to pay for your services. And I think everybody needs to understand that. That's just a common understanding. Let me see if I've got anything else. I think that's the main stuff I was going on. But I think that basically is what it comes down to is we have to look at where we put, a beautiful development is fine if it's in the right spot. I'm afraid this one, which I actually really like the design and the concept, but it doesn't belong in the middle of an industrial area or an industrial agricultural area. Okay? That's it. Thank you, Maxine.
Thank you very much, Lucy. Who would like to speak? Jim Anderson.
I have a wide variety of mixed feelings about this. The residents have made some very excellent points that the impact of this may be particularly great, especially if it's constructed on the scale it is. I agree with Lucy that conceptually it's a very nice idea. And as a parent who used to transport my son to Quail Middle School from across the other side of the east side, that school always bothered me in its location because they appear to have bought it because of the inexpensive land, but did not bear in mind the expense of getting children to and from it by busing and the like, since it's out in the periphery of the county. I think that some of the ideas of the community are really very good. It's probably well too massive a scale, but some of the particular concerns that have been mentioned over and over again include traffic. Old Elberton Road will not be able to handle the kind of traffic that would be created by this development as it stands. It would have to be substantially improved. I, however, do like the fact that this would actually put housing close to the school, which would make having a school there more justifiable than it was when it was initially placed, because then it would be a walkable school, which we don't have enough of in Clarke County at the moment. So I think we have to very carefully consider the concerns of the neighbors. They brought up some very excellent concerns, and if it is developed, I would suggest it be considered on a smaller scale. But a lot of work will be needed before we get to that point.
Thank you. Anyone else? Yes, Jeff, Mr. Scarborough.
Yeah, when I look at this picture, it's a really nice project. It's got everything you need. You know, the idea of walkability, sidewalks, trees. It sounds great. And I understand that you need the density to provide the amenities, the coffee shops, the child care and everything else, and have it all walkable. So inside that box is great, but then when you zoom out a little bit and look at the neighborhood and think about, you know, not everybody's going to work in the coffee shop. They got to go somewhere. And having once lived on this side of town, I'm familiar with Old Elberton Road and Athena Drive and Moores Grove Road. these are not big roads that were built for a lot of traffic. So when you put that many residences and put all that traffic on the existing roads, that's not going to be sustainable. You're going to find right away that there's going to have to be a lot of traffic work done off the site to make anything like this actually work. I do want to speak to, we heard my reaction to tree canopies earlier tonight, and the same thing holds true for this. When people want to reduce a tree canopy, especially in the greenbelt side of town, I'm not a fan of that. So if you're saying you're going to put back more trees than are there, then that would be a detail I would absolutely have to see. Mass grading is another 4-letter word for me, especially for a project that's being developed in phases. I understand maybe why you have to do it that way, but I think especially the way this project is laid out, I don't think mass grading is necessary. I think you can find a way to do it just to do each phase in turn. So I'd like to see something more about that. And then finally, I would like to address the fact that it is in the AR zone, in the green belt, and directly across from what is part of Athens industrial park, industrial area, that side of town. And that points to the future land use. And that is something that I don't know how this would affect the property across the street and the saleability and would it still be considered an industrial piece of land once there's hundreds of residents living across the street? I would think probably not. I think there would be objection from the people who live there. Somebody wanted to put in a ball bearing factory or something across the street. So I'm not sure that this is, for a number of reasons, the right place for this admittedly attractive project. And then the last thing I wanted to address is the idea of the lift station. First of all, I guess all the water comes from the Oconee, so the idea of having a lift station to move all that wastewater from the Broad River Basin back to the Oconee where it belongs makes it not an interbasin transfer, but that's a terrible reason to put a lift station in. In a former life, I was a sewer lift station mechanic, and I know what it takes to keep them going. I know what it takes to maintain it. I know what it takes to make work. And trust me, I know all the things that can go wrong with it. And anytime you can avoid one is a good time. So that's sort of a sum of the concerns that I have with it. It's a beautiful project, but there's a lot of reasons why I don't see it working in this particular location.
Thank you. Anyone else want to comment on the comments? Yes, Ms. Beresford, Sarah.
I agree with everything my fellow commissioners just said. I just wanted to point out a couple things. I also really like the development. I think it's just the right development in the wrong place. I do really feel like, what's the point of having a green belt and having a future land use map if we would approve a project like this? I know we make changes to the future land use map all the time, but they often, those kind of decisions are made in context. We think about them really seriously. I just see nothing on the future land use map that justifies this kind of development in that location. I really appreciate, I think that the report hit a lot of the right points. I really appreciate the interest and willingness to include 20% of the housing units as affordable housing in perpetuity. I think that's great, and I really do hope that there someday becomes the right place for this. But for me, and I had the same thought that Jim Anderson had, the idea of, despite the fact that Coyle Middle School has always been in a strange location for me, and I feel like in some ways, I don't know, same thing that Jim said. I like the idea of sort of creating some community around that school. I just think that's a backwards way to do that. I can't even imagine, to me, the density of this development is the problem, is not the problem. It's the existence of it in this location. I can't even imagine. This is, whether, when I was reading through the public comments, people saying that they wouldn't want to live in this development, that's not as much of a relevant point to me, because there are people that certainly do want to live in that kind of dense style living. But I don't even think this being developed with 1/4 of that density would be something that I think is appropriate in that location either. So, but I really do want to really compliment Mr. Tomlin and the Smith Planning Group for a lot of great ideas in the development, and a lot of things and I think a lot of us really want to see happen in Athens. But for me, it's all about the location.
Thank you. Mr. Hall, Matt.
Yeah, I don't, Sarah said basically everything I wanted to say. So the only reason I'm speaking is to make it clear, since we're at concept review, if the applicant were to come back, that I agree with all that. I think this is a wonderful project. And I think there's a lot of great design stuff in here. It's just a matter of the location to me. There's several reasons why this is not a location where I think I could vote to approve a project like this, or even a considerably smaller residential project. And those 3 reasons are the Greenbelt thing that other people have spoken about, the industrial thing that other people have spoken about, and then the lift station. So I love this project, though. Like on other sites, more appropriate sites, I understand the density is great as far as I'm concerned, because to do workforce housing, you need to reduce the land cost. And so you need to have this kind of density. And so I love everything about this project, except this parcel is not the right place for it as far as I'm concerned.
Thank you. Yes, Ms. Kinman, Alice.
I'll take very brief time because everyone has said everything. I agree with everything that everyone has said. The problem with this project is the location. I just did want to weigh in that my big issues really are with the laws of the industrial zone. I think Lucy is the one that cited the cost of services study that actually I was on the commission, Lucy. That was like my first year, way back in 2005. It does need to be updated, but the bottom line is that giving up industrial zone land is not what we need to be doing in order to increase the housing supply in Athens. Also, the lift station to me is just a deal breaker. I couldn't approve anything that included a lift station. And Greenbelt, of course. Okay, I'll stop.
Thank you, Ms. Kinman. Yes, Ms. Murray.
So super quick, because I do agree with everything that's been said, but this is actually something different. And maybe this is one of those, were you to come back, or really for anybody with this description. One thing that did kind of stand out to me in the presentation was the mention of affordable housing. Or workforce housing, and then there was a mention of normal housing, and there's 20% set aside. I know that I personally would, my definition of what's affordable to me is different from my neighbor's definition. And so I think that really in any time that sort of thing is proposed, I am going to need to know a little bit more information. Like what are the price points we're talking about? What are the median incomes that we're appealing to? I just need a little bit more information from that side of it, because I fear that this term affordable housing is becoming sort of a buzzword that people are kind of adding to presentations, and it sounds good. But in reality, what does that really look like? And I know it's all calculated into the bottom line. So I just feel like if we had some more of that information on the front end, that would help us make some decisions too. So that's it.
Did someone lock me down?
No, we can see and hear you.
You can hear me?
Yes.
Like to.
Actually, Maxine, now we're having a hard time hearing you.
Brad, while we're waiting for Maxine's connection, I just wanted to mention call-in user 3 is not muted. And I think as the host, that's some of the background noise we're hearing, and you may be able to mute that.
I think I got him. Yes, thank you. Well, we may have lost her completely. Okay, Sarah, you're on.
Okay. So is there anyone else who would like to speak to this item?
Me.
Great. Was that Maxine that said me?
I think so.
Oh, Maxine, she's left. What do you want to do, Brad? Do you want to wait for her since she wanted to speak to that item, or what's the best thing there?
Let's give her just like 1 minute to see if she can get back in.
Sounds good.
I would like to suggest that it would be especially good to hear from Maxine, since she was the principal at Coyle and knows the area very well.
Well,
There we go.
okay, she.
We can see you.
Am I back?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry. It's Sarah. Where were you all?
We were
Sarah.
We were waiting to hear from you.
Oh, bless you.
Closed out that item.
Thank you. Just 2 or 3 things that I would like to say, and I'll not. I'm sorry, my internet just went off, so that's what happened. A couple of things. I think one of my really main concerns are my number one reason for not supporting this. Really, it ties 2 or 3 things together, but it's the future land use. I am not ever in favor of asking people to collaborate for hours and hours and time. Lay people, professional people, planners, I mean, everybody who knows anything, and develop something that we're going to use. And then suddenly we just make some arbitrary decision not to use it. Since I've been on the commission, we certainly have made very minor changes, exceptions to the future land use plan. But oh my goodness, nothing of this size and consequence. And so then that kind of leads me to the consequence issue. I'm in total agreement with Lucy that a town, a city, must have all of these components to be viable. And we have to have an area that is an industrial area. We have to have an area that's a green belt. I just feel really, really strongly about that. So those would probably be my very major reasons for not supporting this concept, which is nice, but in this place. But there are a couple of other things too. I lived at Coyle Middle School from its beginning. I had the good fortune of opening that school and with a superb staff. And so I know kind of what it was to move people from the other side of the east side to Coyle. And the whole point is people don't go to that area much. So it seems way away from people. But it is a school for 3 years. This is not an elementary school where kids are going to go pre-K to 5 and be there 7 years. These are middle schoolers that are going to be there 6th, 7th, and 8th, and move from one to the other. And so I'm just not sure that I can support the development of a community around a school where children and families are for the shortest amount of time in their educational time. I think the traffic related to school issue is huge. And so, as I said, I lived there 4 years, and I cannot imagine having 800 apartments to our right with all the cars and the whatever's coming out past the school. One of the biggest points to me was, as I look at this, if you look at the size of the school related to the size of this development, it gives you some idea about the size of the development. Coyle is not a monstrosity, but it's a big building. Well, it looks like a pinhead related to the size of this property. So how massive that it is. The other thing that I want to say, I don't know that anybody's touched on this in particular, so I don't know. I'm curious as to why. But people are not going to Coyle. This development is what, 15, 18? I don't know how far out Winterville is from Athens, but 12, 15 miles, I'm not counting as the crow flies, but as you drive. And so workforce housing, this percentage of people in the workforce are not going to be supported necessarily in the Winterville community, in the Winterville area. And so people have to get from town to Winterville, Winterville to town to work, to do the work that they do. So we have, if every teacher at Coyle lived there, we have 100. So they're not going to all live in this area and work in this place. So they're just some things that we're dancing around that don't fit to me, and that we're using as reasons to do something that really just don't fit. They don't make the case to me. So I'm probably getting more to rambling here, but I am in total agreement that while a nice development, this is absolutely not the place for this development. Mr. Tumlin, do you have anything you would like to share with us as we bring this discussion to a close?
Yes, ma'am. We actually think the location is good due to the school and due to the industrial that's there. We do understand that there's going to be a traffic there, and that's why we're doing a complete traffic analysis. We will take in consideration everything that you've said and get back with you and try to address all of your concerns.
Thank you very much. We hope we've been giving you information that will be helpful to you. All right, we're going to move to our next application, which is U.S. Highway 29 applications. Let me pull my materials over. When Rick goes so fast, I think that my computer's going off. This is a zoning amendment and special use permit, case number zone 2020-07-2094 and SUP-2020-07-1939, located at 990 U.S. Highway 29 North. And the purpose of the request is to amend a zoning condition from a previously approved rezoning and to obtain a special use permit as an exemption from section 9-10-2L1, which both prohibits ground floor residences in a commercial zone and requires that multifamily development incorporate at least 50% as leasable commercial space. So, Rick, can you help us moving forward with this?
Development, which is north of the Kroger Shopping Center. This is by now an older aerial because there's been a lot of development in the area, but this was taken a couple years ago. The subject property itself is pretty much the same as you see. It's just some other development has happened in the meantime nearby. But you can see the subject property. Let me back up one here. The subject property includes pretty much one full parcel here. There would be a future road in this part, as well as part of the Crazy Rays development next door. And then, so we have basically part of this one, pretty much the full one here, and then part of a little bit of the Excalibur tract. Okay, so currently the future land use, and this would remain, is general business. That would remain the same. The zoning, we would just be adding the triangle for the special use. This is zoned CG with conditions. Excalibur has a condition, as well as Crazy Rays has conditions. So it would maintain a CG with conditions and also the special use symbol for this property. So the special use request is to allow ground floor residential in the commercial zone without any commercial use. The proposal is for 280 dwellings, apartments, be 460 bedrooms, 14 two-story buildings with amenities. What's called Tally Crossing will be extended from US 29 north in front of this property, dead end at the end of this property. There's two entrances off of the proposed Tally Crossing extension into this multifamily development. 500 parking spaces are required. They're actually proposing about 54 more. The general business, again, future land use remains. We have one variance request. That's to a public plaza standard. This is a C zone, a commercial zone requirement, mainly meant for public type businesses, not really meant for a private residential complex. So there's one variance being requested. They are providing, of course, for their residents, the amenity areas, tree canopy towards the back where that pond is. They have a lot of open space areas. It's not an intense commercial type development, which is the plaza standard was meant for. So we have a zoning amendment to remove the interconnection condition to Crazy Rays. This came from an earlier rezoning of the Excalibur property, that they would have interconnection properties to the south, which has been done, properties to the east towards 72, trying to get a connection eventually over to Highway 72. So that, again, that connection would stop at this development, as well as a interconnection requirement to the north, to the Crazy Rays development. And what has happened is the development of Excalibur ended up with a stormwater management pond for that commercial development, blocking some of the northern boundary, and then now with this development would block the rest of a possible interconnection. And in this case, the interconnection, the only possible place left would be a very tough environmental area in topographical challenge. We can see the proposed multifamily development. Again, this is the Highway 29, the Tally Crossing road would stop here at the development. Eventually, again, we'd like to get this is on the transportation corridor concept map, try to get a road over towards 72 at Voiles. And then we've got possible connection as well down here. There's from frontage here on 72, but that's not part of the TCC map. That's just something shown on this plan. A little bit more closer and detailed look at the apartment buildings. Again, you see the two entrances, the amenity area. The additional parking is back here, sort of standalone by itself in a corner. And then we have the dam and the lake here. So we have architectural elevations, different lengths of buildings of various styles. We do have a requirement that no more than 30 apartments can be the same elevation. Thus, the little bit minor changes here and there to gables and materials and so forth to make them a bit more interesting and not all the same cookie cutter design. So again, we have an amendment to eliminate the required interconnection to Crazy Ray's property. We have a variance of public plaza standard, and we are recommending approval of those, whether this special use is approved or not. Whatever gets built on this property, we feel like that interconnection, that basically the possibility of that is gone. It probably wasn't a good possibility to begin with, so we're okay no matter what happens on this property. That interconnection would be really difficult with the environmental areas and the topography. So we're okay with waiving that requirement. And that's just a zoning amendment. Now, as far as the special use goes, they have the one variance which would have to be approved as part of the special use. We are recommending a table at this time because we have some concerns still. We would like to see, because again, traffic management, we have a lot of apartments here, a lot of traffic being generated, and we don't have a way for folks to get back to Athens very well. They did have to go through about 4 stop signs heading south into the Kroger shopping center to go to that traffic signal, or come out on 29, go north a bit, and then make a U-turn. And that's a lot of folks in peak hours lining up in left turn lanes to make U-turns on a very busy corridor, especially at peak hours. So we would like to see a commitment to have a road extension of 72 or a traffic signal prior to occupancy. Now, the applicant will explain why both those options aren't perhaps possible at this time, but that's something we would like to see with the residential development of this magnitude at this location. Perhaps relocation of additional parking from the outer edge of development to something more centralized or at least distributed throughout the development. We like to have the additional parking spaces because there's always going to be friends, families, gatherings, people moving in and out. And so service vehicles, deliveries. So we'd like to have a few additional spaces that we really congratulate the applicant on that. But it's just back in the back corner where we feel like it could be better if it could be more evenly distributed. We need a Corps of Engineer determination about some wetlands on the site. It's part of our environmental protective areas map. And we still need to get that. I think they're looking for a letter from the Corps any day now. But until that's done, we can't, by ordinance, we can't approve a building permit for this project. We asked for confirmation of tree management plans. Again, we're talking about 3 affected developments, Excalibur, Crazy Rays, and We don't know the full impact of the, they both have approved tree management plans for those developments, and we don't know the full impact of this development, taking some of that canopy away from those developments. So again, just some detailed plans to make sure they're compliant after this goes through, if this went through. And then there was an idea of, since this is a residential development in a commercial zone, that instead of just regular commercial tree canopy standards, that they bump it up a little bit to multifamily type RM standards. We thought they were pretty close on the conserved canopy there. So that was something we wanted to see if they could do, basically, to get more trees for their residents and treat it more like an RM type development. It's not a requirement. That would be an extra condition if this gets approved. So that concludes the staff report.
Thank you, Rick. And so do we have someone here who is representing our applicant? Mr. Thurman, I see you there.
How you doing?
I'm fine. Share with us about this application.
Okay. Well, my name is Brett Thurman. I live at 160 West Thompson Street, Beauregard, Georgia. I work at, I'm an engineer at Army Tropical Thurman. And I represent the applicant, Excalibur LLC, and Mr. Talley and his assistant, Brian Clark, in this application. I want to talk just a little bit about this, but I don't want to go into a lot of detail unless you've got questions for me, because I'm going to request the table at the end of my comments. The main reason, number one, to request the table is that we do not yet have that U.S. Army Corps of Engineer letter. The developer had a evaluation done of this area 2 years ago, and they received a report from a separate engineer who had recognized that this area was not a wetland and had so written it. He repeated that with a different soil scientist just this year, who went out there and again has confirmed that, but they did more work than the first soil scientist engineer did. Both those reports were submitted to Public Works, and we received confirmation that from them, they would, based on those reports, also say it was not a wetland. But of course, the ordinance requires that the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers confirm this, or at least determine that the reports are correct and it's not a wetland. And we are waiting for that letter from them. We expect it next week. And so that's one main reason why we want to request the table. Starting out in this process, we submitted our plans in the last cycle. We received a recommendation for denial based on those plans. A lot of it was around the traffic issues. And recognizing that, we had already had a number of traffic studies done in the area. It also included a warrant analysis for the signalization of the current intersection on Talley Crossing with US 29. And so we wanted to make sure that staff had that information with them. And so we had made, plus a few other tweaks to the plan. We were able to submit that back to get into this cycle. And I was really pleased to see that we've moved from a recommendation of denial to a recommendation to table. And we want to continue to work with staff, try and move this to a recommendation of approval. We believe that the location is right for this development. We know there's one that was rezoned, just a special use plan was done for another development just across the street and down at the Pole Road intersection. I was involved in that as a civil engineer. The area needs some rooftops. One thing we found through the coronavirus issue and with the way the development was, the corridor has plenty of traffic to bring fast food to the corridor. It has a big box Kroger to bring people from out of the area to to the location, but it doesn't have any rooftops to really justify a better quality restaurant in the area or better quality services in the area. And those are going to go missing unless we can get some rooftops in the area. We know industries are coming into the area. RWDC, the bioplastic plant, is in the old DuPont building. They're going to end up with 3 phases out there and generate a lot of employment opportunity. I have a client that's purchased Boyles Road parcel that's industrial, and they intend to do something in a couple of years out there. And it's quite frankly, it's right across from the previous session that we just talked about and heard about on Old Elwood Road. Their intent is to build a 100,000 square foot factory out there. And and they purchased this property. It's not that they've got an option. No, they've purchased this property. And I think this would be very concerning. And that's why we're seeing to feel like the rooftops around the commercial area here is really the place to be. So I don't want to belabor that point, but the tree plan issues are, I think, technical in nature, and they can be worked out with staff. The spaces in the parking lots are, I mean, every place in the area, there's no permitted parking for people with certain apartments have certain spaces. So anybody can park anywhere. One of the amenities is back in the back at that parking area, and that's the playground. So we want to get the playground away from the front and put it more toward the back. And so we feel like the plan is certainly workable and would be a high quality development in this respect in its current form. And then the final thing is we want to talk again with staff about the entire traffic issue there with the development of being able to put in a traffic light. GDOT, my client has tried to get a traffic light already on 29. He wants the traffic light on 29 because he wants to make he wants that connection between the east side of his parcels and the west side of his parcels through that intersection. But the Georgia Department of Transportation has said no, until you actually have boots on the ground, if you will, and traffic out there that you can count, we're not going to consider putting a traffic light at 29. And so, but we're continuing to push forward with that. And I've had some conversations with commissioners who have offered up some options to consider with regards to some additional conditions to try and make sure that everybody has a comfort level that this effort is going to go through. With regard to Hall Road, Tally and Excalibur Development and CJB are 2 separate LLCs, and they are not owned by the same people. They're not the only connection between the two is Brian Clark, who's attempting to help them also get development on that parcel. And we had attempted to put RM on that CR parcel, but frankly, the extension of the utilities and the extension of the road all the way across Tally Crossing and the Excalibur development, and then across in front of CJB to end at the planned area to further extend the Boyles and also put a driveway down the hall, just became prohibitive for the amount of apartments that were going to be on the property. And it just couldn't sustain itself. And that's why this development has come about, is so incrementally we can get to where we want to be as we go forward in the future. And in short, that's where we are. And unless I have any questions, I'm going to be quiet and say I would recommend, please, that you table this so that we may continue to work with staff in this development and do what's needed to make it a better development that everybody's going to be proud of. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Thurman. I think that the applicant needs us to be willing to table it, and so we have to make a decision if we are willing to table this application or not. They don't have the they can't make that recommendation again. They're asking us if we would be willing to do that. Any discussion about that? Kristen?
I have no problem tabling it. I've actually had the chance to drive through this a couple months ago, and this area, and I is one of those, like, I really love putting apartments within walking distance of Kroger. Like, I think it's great. I really want this to work out. So I'm happy to give them a little more time to get the letters they need and things like that.
That's great. I think probably I would be glad to have a motion if someone would like to.
I'd like to ask a question first.
Yes, Jim, please.
Is there anybody else that wants to speak in favor or in opposition to the proposal? We need that before we make our decision.
I'm sorry, I was unaware of that.
There is no one in the auditorium.
Okay.
There's nobody left.
Okay. So I just was not aware that we needed a for or against to table something. So I'm sorry. Okay. So I will entertain a motion at this time.
I'll make a motion to table.
I'll second.
Thank you. Let's do a roll call, please, Rick.
Morales?
Yes.
He
Rowland?
is left.
Okay. Scarborough?
Yes.
Tucker?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Beresford?
Yes.
Goodrum? Hall?
Yes.
It's, I'm sorry, Kinman.
Yes.
7, 2 abstentions, I guess. So 7-0, 2 abstentions.
I wouldn't, Ms. Rowland had to leave the meeting. She will not be back, so I would not count her as an abstention. There's Katie.
Katie, yes or no on the table motion?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, so 8-0.
All right. Thank you very much. So, Mr. Thurman, we will give you time to get the things put together, and we look forward to seeing you back.
Thank you very much.
All right, we're going to move on to our next application. This is a plan development amendment, case number PD 2020-08-2234, located at 100 Trinity Pond Road et al. And the purpose of this is to amend the existing Martin Meadows plan development, which was originally approved in 2002. So, Rick, can you give us information about this application?
Yes, ma'am. Okay, this is the location map. The hatching that you see is the airport overlay. And so it's pretty much all in the airport overlay, and part of it's in the city of Winterville, a little slight part in the city of Winterville town limits. It's off of Robert Hardiman. There's an entrance off Robert Hardiman. The property has been developed with infrastructure, a few houses, and this is the aerial. You can see the cluster of houses there in the middle of the property, as well as there's some, it's hard to see with the trees, but there's about 4 dwellings back in the this area, the more wooded area up there. Rural future land use designation would remain. And it is ARPD, and that would also remain. We're just amending the PD. So we have an amendment to the 2002 plan development. At that time, there was on the plan, there's some dwellings that were designated as future clubhouse and future guest houses. And now the proposal is for those to be year-round residences. So those would be added to the density and from 62 to 66 dwellings. So there's one waiver because we only allow one accessory dwelling in AR on the parcel. So this would be 4 dwellings, 1 principal and 3 accessory dwellings on the one parcel. There's 125 acres in the development. However, 86 of those are in a conservation easement. Again, the future land use would remain rural, and there's no physical improvements to this, or really plan changes other than some notes to make the 4 go from 62 to 66 dwellings. The density, et cetera, but no really plan changes as far as the layout of the plan development. This is the plan development. This is the, I think this was the original plan development. And then we have, which pretty much, again, will be the same, but you can see the layout there. And let me just point out the houses. I don't know if I can find all of them, but there's a few houses back in the woods, and then we have a main house up front. And so we have an approval. Staff is recommending approval of the condition. There is an existing gated entrance off of Robert Hardiman. It's there. The gate's there. The fire marshal has asked to re-review that. I don't know. Again, to work with the applicant as far as maybe seeing if they can get some modifications made. I think they are concerned about the width of the entrance. There's an island there. So again, just to work with the fire marshal there to try to get that approval. And that concludes the staff report.
Thank you very much. All right. We will hear from the applicant.
Okay, and Maxine, Ken Bell is calling in. He's able to watch the meeting via the WebEx, but not able to speak. So we may not see him, but he is on a phone, and he'll communicate with us that way.
Okay, Mr. Bell.
Let me unmute him.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and ladies and gentlemen of the Commission, and thank you, Brad, for helping me with my technical difficulties. And thank you, Rick, for the staff report. I'm going to be brief. As Rick said, we're really not changing anything about the development other than a little bit of nomenclature. When the project was originally zoned in 2002, there were those existing cottages on the site, and the developer and owner at the time wanted to keep those as guest houses and to have the main house become a clubhouse. And so the counts of those, along with the proposed units, were all factored into traffic studies, sewer analysis, water analysis, storm drainage analysis. They just were not included in the density calculation. So the original density proposed for the project was 0.5 units per acre, because those 4 units were not included. And if we now include those, it will raise it to 5.23, I think is what we figured in our report. So it's virtually an inconsequential modification, because we're really not building anything. There are units that are already there and were already factored. It was just a different way of handling those back in 2002, which was a decision that I think my former partner made when he prepared the zoning documents, and it was acceptable to the planning department and to the commissioners at the time. I don't think it would have mattered if we had submitted it differently then, but it didn't happen that way. So the fact that those were labeled as guest houses means that you can't rent those or sell those to anyone for them to be there other than on a temporary basis. And so the present owner would like to change that condition so that he could have occupants that could live there for an extended period of time. And so that's really the only change that we're making. There are no physical changes that are being made to the plans. No additional units are being requested. And so it's a fairly small modification to what was originally approved. Now, concerning the, I think there's really one concern from the staff report from the fire department concerning how the gates actually function for the project. Right now, those gates are stationary open gates. When the property became distressed in around 2007, the gate actuators never were installed. So the components that would actually open and close the gates presently don't exist, so they remain in an open condition. And I think that the fire chief wants us to relook at that situation. Looking at some as-built plans, it looks as though the gates that were constructed were not installed exactly as the drawings indicated them to be installed. And so when I look at that in an aerial photograph, I can see what may be the fire marshal's concern. And so the fire marshal and I need to look at that together and determine what needs to be done. I can't tell you what that is right now. It may be acceptable with some other modifications, or we may need to change the island. But when it comes to fire concerns, we pretty much have to do what the fire marshal wants us to do. So we'll get that taken care of once we've met on the site and discuss it. Other than that, I don't have any other presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions that any of you may have about this request. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So I'll just call for Alva, even though I know there's no one in the auditorium. Do we have anyone who would like to speak in favor of this?
There is still no one here.
Is there anyone who would like to speak against this? I guess we still have no one there, right?
That's right.
Okay, then do we have questions for our applicant? I have a quick question. In the report under fire protection, it says that additional hydrants are required. I don't know who pays for hydrants. Is the applicant used to pay for them, or are they paid for by fire? The city.
If it's on private property, to my knowledge, it's always paid for by the developer. Mm-hmm. And I think what is driving that statement is that, that's nearly 20 years ago. And so the fire hydrants were located based on the conditions that existed at the time. Mm-hmm. And hypothetically, maybe the fire hydrants could be 600 feet apart then, and now the requirement is 500. So I think it's a matter of there might be a couple of locations where, to meet the current requirement, the fire hydrant may have to be added.
Okay. That just had not been mentioned, and I didn't want us to overlook that. So
right. I did read it in the staff report, and it would have to be addressed.
All right. Any other questions of the applicant? Then I will certainly entertain a motion. Alice?
I'd like to make a motion to approve with the staff condition.
Do I hear a second?
This is Sarah. I'll second that.
Okay, Sarah, thank you. All right. Any further questions, discussion before we vote? All right, then would you do a roll call, Rick?
Kinman?
Yes.
Morales?
Yes.
Scarborough?
Yes.
Tucker?
Yes.
Anderson?
Yes.
Birchford?
Yes.
Goodrum,
Yes.
and Hall.
Yes.
Okay, it's unanimous.
All right, thank you very much. Then we are ready to. I'm sorry.
I said thank you very much.
Thank you. We're ready to move to our next item on the agenda, which is text amendment, section 9-10-2, permitted uses, and this is related to grocery stores and colleges in a CN zone.
Okay, and I will take care of that one real quick. It's a text amendment that was suggested to us by one of our district commissioners as well as the mayor regarding the current commercial neighborhood zoning district. There is a limit on grocery stores that is currently in there that places it at 30,000 square feet. And then for colleges are a little bit unique in that most often a college is going to be associated, with a public institution. Board of Regents, they're exempt from zoning. It does not apply to any of them. But in the case of a small private college that may want to locate in a neighborhood, there was a 10,000 foot cap placed on the allowable size for any of those. This may be the first one I've ever seen that we've had to deal with in this manner, other than when Piedmont went into the old Prince Avenue site and they went through an institutional zoning to allow that to happen there. But so the request is to allow grocery stores to bump up a little bit from that 2,000 restriction at 30 to 36,000, and then also to allow the colleges to come in with that same increase in size limitation. It's still not really, really big, but it is certainly more than a 10,000 square foot building for a private small college is probably a little bit small. So we're recommending that you consider changing both of those to 36,000 square feet in commercial neighborhood only. Whoops.
Kristen?
So does this mean that like a college could build a 36,000 square foot building in a commercial neighborhood? Is that what that is going to give them?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions?
I have a question.
Yes, Sarah.
To be honest, I actually don't understand the first sentence of the proposed change under L3. So it's saying that in commercial neighborhood colleges zoning districts, that colleges can build a 36,000 gross square foot. Yeah, maybe Brad, if you could just say it one more time.
Okay. I know the ordinance says it exists today in a commercial neighborhood zone. Colleges are allowed to, they are a permitted use in commercial neighborhood, but with a limit of no larger than 10,000 square feet. And then retail sales and service that you see in the chart for under the L3, currently it picks up any of your typical retail businesses that you would normally associate with that, but it also picks up groceries under that L3 limitation, but has since 2000 given them the ability to go up to a 30,000 foot footprint instead of 10,000 like other retail businesses. And so what this amendment would do is just bump that one as well as private colleges from 30 for grocery and 10 for colleges up to both of them at 36,000 square feet.
Okay. That makes sense. Thank you.
Matt?
And Brad, just to clarify, sort of following up on Kristen's question, this change would not change the general regulations on commercial zones as far as permissible floor area ratio and lot coverage. So for a college to come in and build a 36,000 square foot building, it would need to be a parcel that was otherwise suitable for that under the existing regulations. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Other questions, Alice?
I don't really have any questions. I think they've been asked and answered, but did we take public comment on this?
No, we did not.
There's nobody here.
There's still no one here.
Sorry.
Procedure, guys, procedure.
I know.
Exactly.
Thank you.
Anyone to speak for this proposal?
No.
Anyone to speak in opposition?
No.
Okay, Alice. That was your comment, wasn't it? Do we have other comments? And I'll entertain a motion.
I'll make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
We have a second. That was Joey. Okay. Any questions or comments before we vote? All right, Rick, would you do a roll call, please?
Kinman,
Yes.
Morales,
Yes.
Scarborough,
Yes.
Tucker,
Yes.
Anderson,
Yes.
Beresford,
Yes.
Goodrum,
Yes.
and Hall.
Yes.
Yes, unanimous.
All right, we will now move into other business and begin with comments related to our two subcommittees, housing and land use. So Matt, would you like to start? And I'll go second.
Let me, and if I could, real quick, I did advise Mr. Drake this afternoon when I was kind of giving him the run through on our procedure that at the end of these text amendments, he was probably free to go, that we did not need him for this part, and this can go on for a little bit. So if he leaves us at this point, it is at the advice of your planning director. So I didn't want you to think he was just done with us.
That's great. Bye. All right, Matt.
Yeah, thank you. So the Housing Committee has continued to meet every 2 weeks. We just met yesterday, and our current topic is missing middle housing. And so we're looking at duplexes and triplexes and considering changes to the ordinances addressed to that. For our next workshop, which I wanted to ask about when we're going to schedule that, you can expect us to present an inclusionary zoning proposal, which we're still in the process of finalizing, but that's what our next work product will be that we'll present to the whole Planning Commission for discussion.
Thank you, Matt. And to clarify, related, you said inclusionary zoning, excuse me, not clarifying anything. Okay, thank you. So I'll move forward and give you all an update. We have completed our draft to submit to you all of our recommendations related to the mass grading ordinance, as well as our second topic, recommendations related to road interconnectivity, both of which were on the mayor's list. We had a time schedule, and we have sent those. We had a group of experts. We'll tell you all about that. That did a great job of giving us input. And so we sent the mass grading ordinance, for which we received the input, to them to get their comments related to our draft. And so that we were waiting on to get that back. We have now finalized that. And so at our work session, we would like to share with you all what we've done on the ordinance related to grading and the ordinance related to road interconnectivity. I was to send on our timeline, I was to send those out to you yesterday, but I decided that you all were getting a few too many things in your box in preparations for today. So I will either send that out to you later tonight. I know you will all be up and waiting with bated breath to get that, to get those two, or I'll send it out to you tomorrow. But you will then have our drafts on those two topics. So I think our next step is to ensure we are following our little chart that Bruce made for us that came from the mayor's charge. And so I think our next topic has to do with minimum residential lot sizes. So I think that's the direction we'll be going for our next topic, as it seems to be outlined here. So we're trying to stay there and do it. We did, one thing I did want to say that Matt and I discussed with the planning staff. Each of our committees had a task related to accessory dwellings. Housing was looking at accessory dwellings related to form. And then on the land use side, we were going to look at accessory dwellings related to location. And so it's the opinion of staff, don't let me misspeak here, I think I'm going in the right direction, staff, as well as land use, as well as confirmed by Matt, that we felt like their proposal that they brought to us really included both. Their recommendation was for accessory dwellings in all RS zones. So that kind of took care of the whole accessory dwelling discussion insofar as we are concerned. Does anyone have any question about that? Because otherwise that topic is completed also. Okay, then that's great. So in order to make this a simpler process, I think I'm going to ask Brad if you would identify some suggested dates for a next work session. Do you need input from us here? Or I thought maybe if you could just send out a couple or three, we could.
Let me send out 2 or 3. I mean, the one that jumps out to me immediately would be 2 weeks from today, on that 3rd Thursday of the month. In terms of trying to avoid Wednesdays, and Tuesdays normally are commission nights, and that one would work for us. Now, I would be a little late joining you. I've got a committee meeting that goes from 5:30 to 6:30 with the mayor and commission, but certainly the rest of staff has spent much more time with you on these committees than I have anyway, and you're in capable hands with them. So that's one, but I can send out a couple more tomorrow if you'd like me to do that.
Well, perhaps we might just ask everybody to look at your calendar. If the 17th works, the 17th works, and you won't have to do that. Alice? You're muted. Oh, you can.
I always go for the wrong button. I'd be happy. I mean, I'm looking at my calendar right now. I'd be happy to go ahead and commit to that date if the rest of the commission wants to do it, or just to have it done.
What was the time again?
Thumbs up is a good idea. Can you look at your calendar and see if you could do the 17th?
What was the time of day?
I mean, we've generally done those either at 5:30 or 6 for a couple hours. No earlier than 5:30.
I vote for 5:30.
Okay.
Okay, so am I seeing that everybody can do that? Yes.
I think everybody. Yes.
Okay, that's good. Then let's put on our calendar a work session. We have two things. One of ours will be longer. One will be short, I think. And then Matt has one. So housing has one on inclusionary zoning. So maybe we could do 3 that night. Let's give it a try. How about it? All right, that'll be great. I don't have anything further to report. Brad?
Just a couple things. Just a couple. One, just a reminder, please hang on to your paperwork for the Lexington Road rezone that was pulled from the agenda for next month. Thank you. Yes, perfect. As well as the Highway 29 special use zoning that Mr. Thurman's involved with. We're not anticipating either one of those changing in terms of paperwork, other than maybe a new report and hopefully a letter from the Corps of Engineers. So if you will do that, that's great. A report from Tuesday night's commission meeting. Both of the rezoning items ended up being withdrawn. The Old Pittard Road rezone was withdrawn by the applicant, as well as the Jennings Mill Parkway. Those townhouses were withdrawn by the applicant, and we anticipate both of those coming back in a different form. So I think you'll see both of them again. The two text amendments, the increase in number of children in daycare and the small text amendment on appeal language, were both approved. And just as a point of information for you all, beginning, and I just don't want you to tell somebody something different, beginning next month with our October Planning Commission meeting, we are only going to be televised on the YouTube channel. We're not going to be on ACTV anymore. And we're trying to pull back where we can. We are completely wearing out our public information office, and so they're looking for ways we can sign ourselves up for the YouTube stream, and people can still watch it, and they don't have to be sitting. You know, we've still got guys sitting over there in City Hall because it's on ACTV as well, and they've got to stay with it. I mean, those guys are running 2-3 meetings a night, 5 and 6 days a week, it seems like now. So we are looking for ways to alleviate some of their work, just because they're running out of resources. So
will we be able to get input, Brad?
Yes, everything will look and feel the same way to you. It's just if somebody at home wants to watch it, they'll watch it on the YouTube channel instead of ACTV. That's the only difference. And that way we can run that from our end, and they can go home maybe, or only run one meeting instead of 2. So
I'm going to have to get on the gram and tell all my fans.
Yeah, there you go. Sarah?
Do you know, and can we know why those 2 items are withdrawn?
The one on Old Pittard Road, which was the rezoning from RS15 to RS8, I believe, was just there were questions. The applicant had expressed an interest to the mayor and commission of being acceptable with their site plan becoming a binding plan. Well, we didn't review it as a binding plan. You all didn't. So if it does not meet technical standards someplace, they really, under a zoning action, commission doesn't have the authority to make something binding that doesn't meet code if it's not a PD. So I think that's why for that one. And then there was just, the opposition from the adjacent neighborhood on the Jennings Mill Parkway created a lot of concern for the district commissioner in that area. And so I believe in meetings and discussion with the applicant, instead of the townhome product, I think they're going to bring back perhaps an RS5 or an RS8 single family rezone, and as a transition instead of the townhouses. That's my understanding at this point, is what we will see.
Okay, thanks.
Mm-hmm. And that is my report.
Thank you very much. Anyone have a miscellaneous announcement? I don't even have one tonight. All right. Do I hear a motion to adjourn? Yes, Alice and Jeff, I'll say yours is the second. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Thank you so much for your hard work. We'll see you in 2 weeks.
Good job.